Share Family presentation this year at the Charleston Conference. The presentation is New Pathways for Resource Description and Interoperability, Innovative Strategies from the Share Family Ecosystem. We have a slight change in our participants. So Tiziana Posemato was listed as being here in person. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us. She is, however, online and will be available to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Today, we're going to go over a little bit of the shared infrastructure. We're also going to discuss the Share VDE FOLIO integration at Lehigh University. And finally, we're going to talk about fitting Share into local workflows in FOLIO. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Nina Servizia, I'm the Associate Dean for Knowledge Access and Resource Management Services at New York University Libraries. I am also the past chair of the Share Advisory Council. And to get started, I just want to give a brief background to those of you who may not be familiar with Share VDE. The Share family is a global community built on the collaboration, bringing together libraries, archives, museums, consortia, and library service platforms in an ever-widening network of interconnected data. Together, we're combining our knowledge and expertise towards a unified goal: to build an open and stable network of interconnected data. To achieve this, we're leveraging the native strengths of linked open data by implementing the BibFrame data model and facilitating the interoperability with IFLA LRM and other widely used ontologies. We convert library information into linked data. This allows for increased integration across systems, driving discovery, access, resource sharing, and collections analysis, revealing data to a wider audience, and encouraging greater engagement with collections by enabling new user services. Through this collaborative approach, we are dedicated to sustaining a global network where libraries, archives, museums, and consortia can work together, share their expertise, and provide greater access to valuable collections and resources. The Share Family linked data ecosystem reflects our principles. It is, at its core, cooperative, interoperable, flexible, sustainable, open, and authoritative. These same principles guide the work of all of the Share Family initiatives, and the slides will be made available after the presentation, and I encourage everyone to take some time to read the slides and to read the links that are contained in the slide for more information. Our presentation today focuses on the implementation of our vendor-neutral shared infrastructure. This infrastructure is the foundation of all family initiatives, and it brings the ecosystem to life, translating theory into a real-world application. It is the infrastructure that allows new ways of sharing information, resources, and collections, supports full operational processes and workflows for libraries, and increases communication across catalogs and fosters collection development. This infrastructure maximizes interoperability, facilitating data exchange between a growing network of data providers and the systems driving core library services. Of particular importance is increasing libraries' ability to use and distribute authoritative data and other collection data that is necessary to improve discoverability and access to the library's resources. The heart of this infrastructure is the entity knowledge base. The entity knowledge base is a linked data store created in each tenant or hub of the Share family. It contains not only descriptive metadata, but also provenance, instance level, acquisition, retention commitments, loan policies, entitlements of the tenant members. It is a living source. It's constantly evolving and updating both through Delta management processes, new records, updates, and deletions from local databases which flow into the central source, and through the editor, which allows librarians and experts from different domains to maintain the data, increasing its quality and richness. Data stores are shaped by the projects they served, using a shared set of tools that can adapt to their unique needs and capabilities of the networks within the ecosystem. So as you can imagine, the automated clustering of millions of data points inevitably has some inaccuracies. Given the conversion process from flat records to real-world entities, this step is not straightforward, and the final clustering results may not be perfect. JCricket, our editor, is a transversal tool that enables the Share community to collaborate on improving entity resolution and clusterization processes. JCricket empowers members to monitor the quality of the Share VDE data, identify actions to correct the data, and steer the system in the right direction. You will hear more about the JCricket and its relation to the entity knowledge base later in the presentation. I would just like to briefly review the development and implementation timeline for this important tool. So the tool went through a 3-year phase from 2020 to 2023 of development, UX design, and prototyping. In 2024, during the summer, we were able to actually invite member institutions to do a test of the interface and of the editor, and also to provide feedback, and that feedback is currently being analyzed. Our goal in 2025 is to react to the feedback that our members have provided. That involves, providing new lookup services, adding additional controlled vocabulary. Other areas of development are better integrations with FOLIO, ALMA, and Wikidata. And finally, we will be developing policies and best practices for catalogers using the new editor. Finally, in 2026, our goal is to leverage all the previous milestones and to support the full operational use of the JCricket editor for our members. We are hoping to consolidate its usage across all of the Share families, and we would like to develop standalone applications of JCricket for members where a standalone application would actually serve them better. Okay, so before turning the presentation over to my colleagues, I would like to highlight an important aspect of the Share family. And this is one that we don't often talk about, but it is necessary to the success of the entire initiative. And that is that the Share family is a true member-driven organization. It is governance by libraries for libraries. So as a member-driven organization, we take this very seriously. It is the foundation of our values, and all of our initiatives and policies are determined by the participating institutions and the consortia that are members of Share VDE. For example, in the development of the JCricket editor, which I just mentioned earlier, the development was completely member-led. Piloting and feedback was provided by the Share members, and recognizing the need for guidelines and best practices in its use, the Share Family Advisory Council is currently charging a governing committee dedicated to JCricket editor and the entity knowledge base maintenance. The goal is to sustain high-quality authoritative data within the Share family ecosystem, and the membership of this new governing body will be selected from members put forward by their institutions. So the same commitment to self-government that led the Advisory Council to release the Share VDE open metadata policy in 2023 So the communities of institutions that form the Share family and leverage its linked open data platform technology freely decide how they want to reuse the data output from the linked open data platform. This topic strongly resonates within the Share family and Share VDE communities, and the Advisory Council is currently supporting ongoing discussion to revise the Share VDE open metadata policy and state the option for open data more explicitly. Open metadata is vital to the health of the larger ecosystem in which libraries, museums, archives, consortia, publishers, and library service providers operate. Metadata is fundamental to the ways the libraries provide services. For example, without open metadata, you can't actually provide open science services required by many institutions. Flexibility, agility, reduce barriers, and interoperable metadata are necessary to support new services and partnerships across libraries. It is also necessary to foster a safe and legal environments for students and faculty to innovate using libraries' data and content by clearly exchanging institution-specific entitlements, circulation policies, copyright restrictions, and licensed permissions restrictions for full-text uses such as data mining and AI. Together, we can collaboratively build a data ecosystem that truly meets the needs of all its members. I hope you'll join us in securing the future of libraries and archives and securing the vital role that libraries and archives have always played in the preservation and access of knowledge. And with that, I'd like to turn it to Jeanette for the next part of the presentation.
We're playing musical chairs today. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about this copy cataloging project and cataloging project from Lehigh University Library. Just to be transparent, I am not from Lehigh University Libraries. I am here because the representative from Lehigh unexpectedly couldn't make it. So I'm Jeanette Norris. I'm at Yale University Libraries, here's a little bit about Lehigh. So Lehigh is located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It is a private research university founded in 1856, and it has 4 library sites. One of them is pictured here. Lehigh is frequently noted and is known for their innovative approach to library systems. They have led open source and community-driven development work. It was a founding member of the Open Library Environment, the first library in the United States to go live to implement FOLIO, and was involved in other projects like Reshare and the Collective Collections Lifecycle Project, along with their consortia policy. So Lehigh's involvement in Share VDE is strategic. They like to explore new ways to optimize and connect their collections to their users via co-creating easy linked open data approaches and tools, and work within a community of like-minded institutions on amplifying the reach of their metadata expertise to address university-wide challenges. So this is the Lehigh project team. Lisa McCall is the head of metadata services there. Macby Levin, senior application developer. Aaron Klaas is a student intern who worked on the cataloging for the project. And Boaz Nadovmanis, university librarian. I will direct you to Boaz, who is at this conference, if you have any questions about the Lehigh project. So this project is focused on cataloging for a specific donated collection, the Rodale collection, which was donated to Lehigh in 2018 and represents the archives of this family, the Rodale family, who were health and organic movement publishing pioneers in Berks County, Pennsylvania, from the 1930s to 2017, when they sold their publications to Hearst. So this includes 3 generations of Lehigh graduates, and clearly of importance to the institution. The collection includes a lot of varied materials. You can see some of them here. So it's published in unpublished works of the family members, correspondence, financial records, press clippings, many different formats. So VHS, beta, reel-to-reel, anything that you can imagine, as well as a compilation of the Rodale incorporated periodicals, books, manuscripts, and marketing materials, and 3,000 monographs in multiple languages, many in non-Latin scripts, and about a third of them require original cataloging. So Lehigh was attracted to the BibFrame model, and specifically the Share family model, which includes an opus entity, which we'll talk about later, because so much of the work of the because this collection included a lot of different translations. So a single work that's translated multiple times, and the ability to connect those with the opus entity was of real interest. Additionally, in the MARC model, each translation will require its own full description, and under a BibFrame model, pieces of it would only have to be recorded once, described once, and then would inherit to the rest of the description. So this served as a good test case for them for working with BibFrame. It's a finite collection, and it seemed well suited for the organization and clustering that BibFrame promises. So these are Lisa's, the head of metadata services, research questions. And I really like the framing of this, right? A way to sort of assess whether or not this project is actually meeting their needs. So one of the promises she notes of BibFrame is an efficiency in cataloging. And there's a hope that BibFrame, that once the data sources build, the basic building blocks of records will be in place, so that rather than having to constantly recreate a description, you can link to it, right? And refer to it through your records. The Rodale collection, with its many multiple translations, should be a good candidate to test this promise. Additionally, Share VDE's 4 tiers of entities appealed to them because of that opus level, which they hoped would serve to gather various translations under it, and that this is something that that was an extension of the Share, the SVDE ontology. And the work that @Cult and Index Data did in developing an integration that allows them to enter records as BibFrame into JCricket and then see them immediately in their FOLIO test environment has given them a practical example that they can start to think about building on, right? So they're thinking about the value of the FOLIO record once it's ingested, and hoping to work with the FOLIO linked data special interest group to improve on that value. So one example that they're discussing is making sure the URIs from JCricket get embedded into that MARC record or the instance record that's in FOLIO. And for the final question, they're still at the very beginning stages of this project, so they're not at a point to start thinking about the strengths and weaknesses from a cataloging perspective. So these are some early observations from their student intern, Erin Kloss, who is from the Library and Information Studies program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she worked with them on cataloging on the MARC and BibFrame portions of the collection. She was interested in taking part as part of her student practicum. And fortunately for Lehigh, in addition to her interest in cataloging and BibFrame, she also knows Korean. So she cataloged the 45 titles that were present in the collection in both Korean and English. And Lisa notes that it was very valuable to have the insight of someone who has worked now equally in both formats. So a couple of observations that Erin had. They were using an earlier version of JCricket, and she was particularly interested in enhancements to look up authorized terms more easily, and and to have a template where commonly used fields could be populated as necessary. All right, so on to discovery. Right now, they can use either the linked data information via an API or in the FOLIO records created in JCricket for enhanced discovery in Lehigh's online catalog, which is built on ViewFind. So one thing that they're interested in is whether or not there could be side-by-side opportunities. So this is an example of one where there's an entry where it's the general expected MARC display. And then you could link out to a view that provides that relationship between that opus level and each of the individual instances, and even potentially visualize the entire collection in this way. So these are dreams for the future. So as an external observer, I am really interested in thinking about what this teaches us about the multiple roles of bibliographic description. We can see it here in terms of discovery, in terms of also just sort of the cataloging workflows, and the sort of inventory management side of library collections. And one role that I think is really interesting in terms of the work in opus entities is that in collection management, we have an opportunity to better understand the relationships between the works that we are collecting, and to think more broadly and deeply about what that says about the actual diversity and breadth of what we hold. All right, so this next section is just an overview of the JCricket entity editor. So if you have any questions about this section, Titiana is listening in and is able to answer any questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't have her speaking for herself. So this show up pretty well there. So this is just a visualization of a record that you first can see in the Share VDE main portal, and then you can flip over into the editing mode, right? So that you can correct and edit or add to this entity. And here's an example of where you can take, for example, an agent entity and get data that you need to refer to in another record. All right, so recognizing that we're at a collections conference rather than a cataloging conference, I'm just going to go over this very briefly. But here you see the entire model. And I wanted to show this, make sure that it was shown to explore the rationale that Lehigh had for focusing so much on this opus entity. So the idea is that is sort of a collocating point. So the example here is Romeo and Juliet, and you could think that it's right, every iteration ever, it's a conceptual idea of Romeo and Juliet. And then sometimes it's in English. And so the next level down is that work, that opus that's in English and has certain attributes. And then finally, instance level, where you're more at the sort of inventory management level, right? So this is a specific publication of that opus. And this data model was developed by the Sapienza Entity Identification Working Group, which is part of the Share governance system, and it extends the BibFrame model. So it's really important to write, you can see the ontology prefixes there, so you can tell which parts come from BibFrame and which parts are the extension. And so it is interoperable with BibFrame and provides an opportunity to sort of expand on our traditional bibliographic descriptions while staying within the cataloging family. And then you can transform that multidimensional data into an instance record for FOLIO, much like you would expect in our ILSs. So here is just the next few slides I'm going to go through very quickly. They are just examples of different entities and the version in Share VDE, the public portal, and then the sort of public interface, and then in JCricket, which is for editing. So here is the opus. The work instance. You can see there's a lot more for the individual publication information, and then agents. All right, so I am handing it over to Sebastian now to talk more about fitting it into FOLIO.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm an instance guy. My colleagues here have given me a hard time for the last few days, but I come from a folio background. My name is Sebastian. I'm the co-founder of Index Data. I was the original architect, one of the original architects and designers and developers of the Folio library service platform. So in some ways, I have held this screenshot or this picture in my head for about 10 years, and it is incredibly fun to see it come to life. This is basically the view of the instance that Jeanette was just showing in Folio. It shows up there after just a second or two. There's an ongoing synchronization that takes place between Share and Folio, and I'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics of that. But the vision here is that you can work on your bibliographic data in the Share environments in a shared ecosystem or in a shared platform where you are maintaining metadata with other people. And then once you're happy with it, that data shows up in Folio, and basically the next step becomes you can attach items to it, you can plug it into your purchase orders, and you can do all the kinds of library management system things to it. And we got that flow back and forth to work really seamlessly. And that's really in part because Folio was always, from the beginning, intended to support this kind of use. We started work on Folio, as I said, about 10 years ago. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how to approach bibliographic metadata because we knew that Folio somehow would sit at a point of transition from traditional sort of silos of MARC records into something else that we didn't quite know what would be 10 years ago. We knew that there was going to be a change. We were sort of assuming that it would involve some kind of a shared platform or ecosystem for maintaining data, but the shape of it we didn't know. So the way we tried to approach that in Folio, so Folio is a highly modular system. It's built up around apps that talk to each other and that support different workflows and different types of data objects. And the one that is a hub for a lot of everyday library work is the inventory. And the inventory is where we maintain instances. And those instances map fairly reasonably well to the instance that has been defined for BibFrame. It's conceptually the same thing, and that's by design. So the vision here was that in inventory, we have these instances, and they can be described ultimately in lots of different ways. You can use lots of different languages and tools for populating your instance. But everything else in Folio, your management of acquisitions, your circulation, doesn't need to know about whether Folio is dealing with BibFrame or MARC or something entirely different. So the inventory and the instance in Folio is kind of our intersection points. So we have already today a universe where lots of different users of Folio and practice has that instance mapped into lots of different kinds of systems. There are plenty of libraries, especially in the US, that maintain silos of MARC records because that suits their local needs. In Germany, it's common to have Folio wrapped into the national catalog. In Sweden, they have had Folio mapped into a local BibFrame-based metadata infrastructure for almost 5 years now. All of that, again, comes together around that instance. So that became how we plan to support the migration away from MARC in Folio. Ultimately, what we were waiting for was what that ecosystem would look like, what that infrastructure would look like for bibliographic data. And it's sort of my thesis and why I have been a cheerleader for the Share project, that it's the first real candidate for an open bibliographic ecosystem that has some form of shared governance and control, a commitment to open data, and something that you can truly kind of trust to put your data into without having it turn around and assert claims or restrictions on what that data is used for. I want to get back to the importance of that in a little bit. I just want to highlight or just show this to give you a sense of what goes on behind the scenes. So the folks at Casalini did a lot of work moving from data that exists in the opus, in the work, and the instance, and mapping that into the particular data model that's been developed for the Folio instance. The Folio instance really grew organically based on the types of data elements that were needed to support different types of workflows in the library. It was the result of different working groups representing everything from resource management to resource access coming together to say, these are the things that we need to see in the instance record. And that's the crosswalk that we're seeing there. So we've been living now, it feels to me like it's been 15 years. Michaela and others might see it's more or less, right? It feels like it's been a long time that BibFrame and linked open data has been really abstract, and it's been really kind of unclear how it would fit practically into everyday workflows, how we would use it. So I think it's really neat to see this stuff happening in practice. The thing that got me excited about participating in the pilot with Lehigh was seeing it work in real life and testing our assumptions. So we hope to see other people use this. We also hope to make this part of a conversation between Share and the people working on bibliographic infrastructure at Clarivate, at EBSCO, at OCLC. So we see this, or I see this at least, as part of a larger conversation about how we want to be working with and engaging with bibliographic data in the future. So that's the significance of this. So governance is critically important for this, right? And trust is critically important for that. And a lot of my time is spent in different types of collaborative projects that are trying to support libraries engaging with each other in different sorts of workflows, from purchasing materials to resource sharing, to collaborative projects to look at collection management, collection lifecycle management, through discovery and access, resource sharing. All of it ultimately depends on bibliographic data. And what it ultimately depends on is having a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about bibliographic data and bibliographic entities. It is enormously important, if I'm trying to decide in my library to acquire some material, to know whether you already have that same material in your library and whether you have an agreement with me to lend that material to me if I need it. It's important for me to know if you have a retention commitment attached to that same material. I have felt on my own body, really concretely, the friction that arises if we don't have a shared understanding, a shared model of what bibliographic entities are, right? So the risk and the challenge that we see is either that we're trying our very best to take these different silos and match them up and say, okay, well, I think this is the same thing that you have, but I'm not entirely sure, right? But we're going to try to kind of make it work. Or we move into some bibliographic, some shared environments, but that environment turns around and says, hey, we want to mandate what you do with this data. This data now belongs to us because we have enriched it in some fashion. These are both really, really bad outcomes. And the worst thing that could happen when we move from bibliographic, from MARC-based silos into some kind of shared linked data universe is that somebody comes along and asserts rights and ownership over data or the identifiers that we need to know whether we're talking about the same entity. The worst thing that can happen, or the worst thing, or second worst, is that we end up not with one shared environment, but 3 or 4 that don't talk to each other. So the only way to collaborate on resource sharing or collection management or anything else is going to be to buy all your stuff from the same vendor, all the way from your library automation down to your content. That would be a bad outcome, because there's nothing worse for innovation and competition and ideation than having just a single provider of everything soup to nuts. That ultimately shuts down creativity. It shuts down innovation and new ideas. So that to me is why this moment is so really important, right? And why the commitment to shared governance and to open data is in some ways the most important feature of the Share platform that I see. Not just because of what we're doing with FOLIO today, but because of all the things we want to do to support resource sharing and collection management and all these other things. It's really important. We have this opportunity to fix the way we work with bibliographic data right now, but it's fraught because there's a real tendency for technology to snap into monopoly conditions of different kinds. We see that. So I think with that, we have a little bit of time for questions and such.